In the Wild West world of podcasting, there is one podcast that is authentic and genuine and continues to stand tall in its originality. Based on a passion for his guests, their work, and his love of podcasting, Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast get amazing, diverse, unique guests found nowhere else. The variety and quality are endless. There is something for everyone. Derek Thomas is the hero you deserve. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector. Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
No, I've got your paperwork. Have you read it? You're not going to push me around. Don't insult me. Don't insult me. Money's never a problem. You listen to me. You just have to honor the correct price. You got that? What? Then go home, Toby. You make me sick.
I can't do this many leaves for $10.
Grow up, Toby.
Mac, open internet, please.
Command unknown.
I think I have to research alternative specs.
Searching alternative sex.
What?
Listing.
No, shut down.
Barnyardlove.net.
Abort.
Funwithfruit.com.
Oh, snap! A softball pitch.
You think you're good at this?
Oh!
Get me a snow cone.
Wow.
This is it. A road trip. I can't get off work.
Come on, guys. What do we have to look forward to anymore?
In my day, ladies stayed home, not the lazy men.
In your day, the men were busy building pyramids.
Oh.
I think you all need this trip.
This spring, they may not know how to ride.
I gotta work on the fist tapping thing.
No, you gotta work on the bike riding thing.
But when they hit the road, they had no idea it would hit back.
She is perfect. I wanted to say something funny, but all I could think of was black jokes. Please, do tell.
From Touchstone Pictures, they went looking for an adventure.
What did you do?
Maybe I blew up their bar.
Oh!
I know, that was bad.
And found a journey
Hogs, baby!
they'd never forget.
Never let life get too safe. Every now and then, you got to slap the bull.
This will be interesting to see now that the bull's alert.
Alert!
Wild Hogs.
What do we have here? 4 men in a bed, spooning. You fellas don't even recognize just how lucky you are to have each other. Damn lucky.
Are you wearing pants?
No.
Hi, this is Walt Becker, and you're listening to Monday Morning Critic Podcast.
Walt Becker is a director, writer, and producer. His films have grossed nearly $1 billion. That's $1 billion with a B. His filmography includes Wild Hogs, Van Wilder, and Clifford the Big Red Dog. I am a super fan of Walt Becker. Walt, thank you for coming to the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I don't know where to start because I asked you on the show knowing that you were just this director that I just love your work. It's my dad and I bonded to a lot of your movies. He loved them. I love them. I still love them. And but I came away not realizing how serious of a writer you were or are. How the eclectic nature of what you do direct. The TV shows you've brought to television. My God, Walt, it's almost overwhelming trying to process everything you've done and are still doing.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. A lot of it is, just, I guess, trial and error. But it's also, writing is fun. I tell everybody that, if you're serious about wanting to get into anything, really, whether that's directing or acting, you should try to hone your writing skill because you can always write yourself into a job. So in the event that, I'm not getting a job one way, then, if you're always writing, you have other projects that sort of percolate to the surface. And that's another great way to go about it.
Yeah, and you wrote a graphic novel called Last Rain. Is that something that's still in development? Is that something that just goes back and forth? From the sounds of it, very interesting stuff there, Walt.
It's a very cool idea. So the first answer is it's kind of in cold development.
Gotcha.
So it's co-owned with myself and Boom Comics, the company that put the IP out. And what I have found, this is especially true, like if you're a comedy director, but you want to do a big sci-fi adventure film. It's hard enough sort of pitching yourself as the person to do that. What makes it a little bit easier sometimes, especially if you have a really cool idea, is to get a piece of IP behind it, get a graphic novel written. And so that was the idea behind doing that idea as a graphic novel, was basically sort of to illustrate the world visually, so studios wouldn't think I was tripping off X, Y, or Z. So that was the purpose. The method was to use that as kind of an entry point into talking about a movie idea.
Yeah, it really has a lot. It's just very captivating. I was researching it last night. Let me ask you this. So where does it all start for you, Walt? Right. So I know the typical question here that 99% of podcasters would ask is, how'd you get into directing? But I think that's just too simple of a question. I feel like it should be, where are your roots? Where does your foundation begin? Right. Because every time I talk to a director, I always picture Spielberg when he was a kid, just filming things and just loving movies and loving, actors and storytelling. Where does it all start for you, Walt? Where is the point for you where you knew you had a love for this?
I think it probably started early, like around 9 or 10. We weren't Spielberg shooting, an actual film, but we were shooting on a friend of mine's dad, who was a documentary producer's, giant Betamax video camera combo. And, we would end up pretty much almost every weekend for about 3 years shoot a little movie on Sundays, because a couple of families always got together. And so we would just sort of write like a short film when we first got there. Then, you'd have to organize the wardrobe. Then you'd have to figure out how many kids were going to be over there, so we knew how many characters we had. They were largely slasher films because I grew up kind of, it was in that time in the 70s, and as a kid, and also they were a little easier to plot because for us it was figuring out, who dies first, who dies last, who's the killer. So it kind of started like that. And then we would just sort of, we weren't even using the, we weren't editing because his equipment wasn't there in the house. So we basically shot, we were shooting the whole movie in camera. So we had to write it all out and then shoot scene by scene by scene. And as we got a little better, we would actually try to make the transitions a little groovier and do that. But oddly enough, when I got into USC Film School eventually, in grad school, I think one of the first things they had us do was shoot a movie in camera. It was the very, very first thing we did with no editing, just scenes back to back. So I think that's the long answer of when it, kind of a love started. But I don't think I figured you could make a living out of it until way after college. That was. Yeah, and
I worded that poorly. I meant when Spielberg was a kid, like he would do the same things that you just described to me, which I think is so fascinating how you grew up doing that. When you said slasher films, was it like, Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers?
Yeah, that was the heyday. It was like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the John Carpenter films. It was this was, I remember it vividly because MTV was starting. It was just a very, very cool time to sort of grow up. And I think those horror movies were such a big part of, along with the Star Wars. But, before Star Wars, that was kind of, that changed the direction of stuff. Before Star Wars, it was a lot of the big movies were great horror films.
Yeah, and you and I are roughly the same age, and I got to tell you what, boy, have things changed, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
listening to you speak about horror movies and MTV, it's bringing me down this road that a time gone by that was just so like, I don't know, genuine and fresh and just I don't know, it's just a beautiful time gone by. I don't want to get too
no, but yeah, it was a lot more non-cynical is what I call it. People weren't afraid of big ideas. People weren't afraid of anything. I think we've generally gotten I don't know, to a place of people trying to out fancy each other or outsmart each other or out intellectualize each other on art. And back then in the 80s, the movie business, at least in my eyes, now the people that were actually adults in it growing up probably have different stories, but my understanding of it was people were trying to make great popcorn movies for people. And it didn't matter if it was a horror movie, Space Odyssey, even a dramatic Oscar type of film. They were all kind of trying to serve the same purpose. No one was trying to be too fancy. They just wanted to tell great stories. It was an awesome time.
And I go back and forth with this, Walt. It's the idea that, it's kind of good that we have like these streaming services like Hulu, Netflix. But I feel like the time period that you and I are talking about, I feel like when a movie dropped, it meant more because you could only see it in certain places, right? There wasn't like, you can't just keep on rewatching it on a streaming service. But then I'm like, well, streaming services allow for more content. So it's like I always get torn in that kind of opinion. If we're better off today, or are we better off, 30 or 40 years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely the idea of the event movie. I don't think it's gone away, but certainly I remember, I think I was 8 maybe then, in line at the Mann Theater for Star Wars.
Wow.
I think the news actually interviewed us when we were waiting in line because it was like wrapping around the block like 3 times. But it was, those type of experiences, they were, we're going then. And it was pretty incredible. I have gotten excited to watch like, the Batman with my son, who of course had already seen it, but I hadn't. So on the date that dropped, that was kind of fun to go watch with him.
Yeah.
Just to hear the song that he kept singing over and over and over again. Whatever that.
But that song is very close to the Imperial March from Star Wars. The dun dun.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to say Michael Giacchini is as taking it. I'm just saying it's very. There's John Williams has big roots. Is what.
Oh yes, yes.
So where I know you live in California now, but where did you grow up, Walt? Didn't you? You were doing an interview. I was watching a little bit of it. There was many I don't know if it was a club. There was many women on the screen, and they were like talking to you about Clifford the Big Red Dog. It was a great interview.
That was I forget the exact name of it, but it was a group. It was kind of an alliance of female directors.
That's it. And you had mentioned, I thought you had mentioned that you grew up not in California, but you moved somewhere else.
Well, so I did. I grew up in Pasadena, California. So I was born in Hollywood, but raised in Pasadena. And then when I was 8, my folks moved out to Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
Which was like 76, I think. It's a bit of a culture shock. But we were there for a year and a half, and then we moved back. So lived in Memphis for a year, and then moved back to Pasadena, actually. So pretty much Pasadena, born and raised.
Yeah, and you told a heartbreaking story when you were in Memphis, because you guys were talking about Clifford the Big Red Dog, and you were talking about you were leaving with your brother, and you guys were so heartbroken because I think you said you had to leave a dog behind or something.
Yes.
Well, listening to you tell that story, I had tears coming down my face.
Yeah, it was our dog Teddy, and I was telling that group that the whole doc scene in Clifford came about because I was pitching out this traumatic experience that I've just never ever forgotten. Of our dog. It was the right thing to do for Teddy because, he was a big golden retriever, and we were going to move into a little apartment. And he had 5 acres there and, basically roamed around and did what he wanted. But leaving him was very traumatic. And he, I just remember looking out the camper in the back glass windows. He's like running after us. We're screaming, "We love you, Teddy! We love you!" Oh, it was brutal.
Brutal. Heart wrenching.
Yeah.
So you end up going to get your BA at UCLA for communications. You mentioned USC. You got your master's in cinematic arts. How vital were those two things in your life, Walt, to get you where you are today?
Well, it's funny because if people are considering like a career as directors, I don't necessarily think, especially nowadays. I mean, you have more tools in your phone than we had by a long margin when I was in college. So I think the need to go to film school has sort of there's less of a need. For me, UCLA was great, because it set a great foundation. I was in the communications program, which I kind of tell people was like film school light, it was about media and broadcasting and messaging. And so again, it was like trying to claw at the interest that I didn't think I could actually make a living at yet. So it was staying film adjacent while I figured out life. But that was, more than anything, just fun. And then I ended up doing a show for TBS and TNT called Glory Days, which was basically based on that time at UCLA and what it was like being in a fraternity back in the 80s. And then USC, that was definitely more targeted as here's training to have a career in film and television. And that I thought was pretty invaluable because they had great story classes. The filmmaking was great, and then just the alumni network afterwards, I thought was pretty terrific. So I was part of a program called the Peter Stark producing program, which is still around and thriving, and that I actually thought helped. Not necessary to do what kids and people have dreams to do, but it helped me.
Yeah, and by nature of your work now, right? So you and I talked before about off air about Super Bowl ads, some really great ones that you've made, some commercials that you're filming. So is it a matter for you, Walt, of just taking work as it comes, or is there something do you like being away from a certain aspect, whether it's television or movies, for a while and focusing on commercials? Is it a matter of just having variety? Is it a matter of work? Because, like I said at the beginning, like you do a lot of things, and you're a really, really talented movie director as well as a producer. I'm not saying that, but I feel like your filmography, pound for pound, is really a phenomenal one. Do you find that you like to just change things up, or how does that work for you when you accept jobs?
Yeah, it honestly, I wish. I mean, this is probably a character flaw in me, maybe, but it's more. I wish it was like, oh, I do it for. It's kind of I'm more of the happy-go-lucky journeyman director, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
kind of just trust in God and the universe and the process, and then things kind of percolate, and then this is presented itself, and then you go do it because you want to feed your family and do all that stuff. So I haven't obviously you write things that you're passionate about, so when I'm writing stuff I do that, but I haven't I'm not the type of director, and I know a bunch are, it's just a different type that are single-minded about, I have to tell this story, and then they'll write the script for 6 years, then raise the money for it, and then shoot it. And, that I don't, not to say that it will never happen, but I'm just trying to go through the movies that I've done, and they've really been very happy accidents of being, at the right place in the right time and working hard, and then having the universe put things together for you. So it's just basically trusting that the next thing will be there.
Yeah, no, that's well said. There's 3 movies that I want to talk about with in your filmography. Before we get there, there's a couple things I want to talk about. And I know you've talked about this topic for a while, and it drives me nuts because I feel like I don't agree with critics most of the time. I feel like when you go to Rotten Tomatoes, it's always the audience score that's reflective of a movie's true nature. A critic's job is to be in touch, I feel like, with people. Well, how can there be such a vast differential with what they think to what the majority of people that are paying to watch this movie think. Like, if there's this big of a disconnect, then people shouldn't be a critic. They shouldn't be watching movies and giving their opinion to others. And when those opinions fall flat, it's like, well, your job is to be that person going to the theater, watching the movie before anybody else gets a chance to do it. And they're off. Like, I've had many directors on, many guests on, and stuff that I love, critics maybe didn't like. And it's like, I don't know who they're speaking for. I feel like there's a huge disconnect, Walt.
There absolutely is. I think, I'm trying to be political as I talk about this, but I do think there's a disconnect. I think that there is there's an obvious process about making a movie for an audience, right? And then we test the movies for audiences and before the movie comes out. So we know if audiences love the movie, generally. And then, I feel like, I'll give you an example. I tell this to people sometimes. Whatever this group, and it's changed. In my opinion, back when critics, there was a local critic at a local paper, right? Mm-hmm. And first of all, they didn't aggregate anything. When they didn't aggregate anything, in my opinion, I honestly think these review sites have sort of, now we're getting over it a little bit. For a long time, I thought they tarnished the business kind of. Mm-hmm. When a movie opened, you could have a bad review in, Houston or LA or Seattle. Somebody doesn't like it, but it's not going everywhere. The guy in LA might have loved it, or the lady in, Austin might have loved it. And so it was more local flavor, and people went out to the theaters and maybe they just read that one review. With aggregators now, my sense of it, this is just a sense, it's only my theory, is that somewhere along the lines, people stopped thinking for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're writing in a silo and you're writing a review on a movie and you don't know what the next person is saying, 2 states over, which they don't, unless you had ordered, 300 newspapers, then you're thinking for yourself, and this is what you feel. What I think happens now is all these people, not all of them, because some of them are very nice, smart people, but a lot of them, are bloggers that try to outdo one another in terms of how much hate they can sort of spill out on a movie. And so I think it's a bit of a groupthink as well, where, it's like the cool kids in school, right? Mm. They don't want to like anything unless it's X, Y, Z. And I think audiences are just as smart and certainly, know what they like. It's just whatever this sort of consensus is. So that's where I think the disconnect is, to be honest. I've read a lot of really smart, the reviews, I guess, that I tend to like or understand is when they talk about a movie, first of all, where they're just not trying to trash something and it becomes about the writing. It's like, how many layers of hate can I throw on this film? It's more about, hey, this is what it was, just like you were describing. Here's how I felt. I wish, I was hoping in the third act they could have, X, Y, Z, no spoiler alert, whatever. Like it's a bit more, I guess, of constructive criticism. But at the end of the day, as a comedy person, or largely comedy, I tell people, because you get that question, like, do you hate reviewers generally? I'm like, well, first of all, I can't blanket statement everybody. But I say, you know what, if you're making a bacon cheeseburger and you're making a bacon cheeseburger and you love bacon cheeseburgers like I do, but you serve it up to a group of vegans, they're not going to, they're not going to appreciate the bacon cheeseburger. Right. So I think that's sort of, in a weird way, the disconnect. So, you kind of, you always try to make the best movie you can. I don't know if anybody tries to purposely fail. But that some concepts going in are not going to, they're not sort of movies that are going to make the critical community come alight, if that makes sense.
No, and I love the way you phrase a few of the things there. You're right. It's almost like they're trying to outdo one another with their nastiness. Like, that is such a good point. It's almost like they're not making it about the movie anymore. Now it's about themselves. So it's like either you're a critic helping people by giving them a summary of the movie, what you thought, or critics, I feel like now are interjecting themselves into the process to make it about themselves. Like,
that's exactly right. Yeah, that is exactly right. And then, they want to somehow create this power of, the gatekeeper. The problem is the audience, especially because they have audience review, people get it. The disconnect has been so obvious forever. So they're going to see the movies that they want to see. It's just sad. I honestly, I think it is because of the aggregation. It was never like that. I don't think. I mean, I think there were people always hating on stuff, but certainly now with social media and all the different tools, it's gotten easier to just spew whatever out you want.
Yeah, and critics, they struggle with movies, but they really struggle with comedies. Like, if you type in any comedy, like Caddyshack, Step Brothers, the greatest comedies that we've seen, like, they get poor scores. It's just like they struggle with comedies, especially, I feel like, because they don't know how to approach it. They just don't understand the process. Just looking at I wanted to start with Van Wilder. Are we at or past the 20th anniversary with that, Walt?
I think we just had the 20th anniversary because people had sent me stuff on that. So I can't believe that movie was 20 years ago. But that was fun, but just past the 20th this year.
Ryan Reynolds has some nice things to say. I was doing some research on this. He, many people as well as Ryan will admit that this movie really was a springboard for his career. It's absolutely one of those classic movies that, I grew up loving and just really appreciating. Did you know it was special when you were making it, Walt? Is that something that developed over time, or was it instant?
I don't know. I knew we had. I was laughing hysterically the whole time when we were shooting it, so that was a good time. I knew that Ryan was a world-class talent because that was part of the pitch for me to do that movie. I said I just worked with I call him this kid, but this kid Ryan Reynolds on a movie I did called Buying the Cow. And I told the producer, Andrew Pernay, I said, you've got to see this scene with this actor in it. He's like amazing. I think he's going to be a giant movie star. And so I played him like a 10-minute clip, and that's how we got Ryan in the movie. So I knew we had sort of a very amazing, rare comedic leading man talent in it as the lead. So, that box was checked. But that it was an independent movie. So it was kind of financing was hobbled together from all over the place. There was no real, kind of studio presence hovering over us, I guess. So it just felt like a really insane hyperdrive version of these little movies that we were doing on the weekends. Cause they just said, here's your money, go make the movie. But we were, oh man, laughing so hard when we were making that. So we didn't, I think when you're making something good, but you don't really know, until the very end. And then no matter what you do, when you get into the edit, it's always, I forget the phrase, but it's like when you're shooting, all the scenes, seem better than maybe they are. And then when you get into the edit, all the scenes seem worse than they were, and the truth is somewhere in between. And then, you kind of have to rebuild and refine the movie while you're editing. So I don't think I felt confident about movies before, but you never really know until, you put it in front of an audience.
And any nerves on your end? Because I know this is like your first major project at the time. I want to say, I hope I'm right with that. Any nerves on your end?
Oh yeah. I can't watch. I mean, I hate being in screenings. Yeah. I hate being at our own premieres, to be honest. So that's, you always get, nerves kind of get racked when you do that. I remember we tested that movie down in Orange, and in a big stadium seating. And at the time we were like, oh, comedy, that's not good for stadium seating. It's better to do it, with one big floor, which is true, I find. So I was already nervous about that. And we sat in the very, very back, like the very last row. And it was like I couldn't hear as much laughter as I usually hear, because we kind of did a college tour on some of it. So I'm pacing around in the bathroom after thinking, oh my God, I think I'm just trying to debate our producer. I'm like, I think it's in the 80s. I think we just did like 82 or 83 or something like that. But, and it ended up testing at a 94, which is for a comedy, like,
wow,
almost off the charts. I mean, you don't really score anything in the high 80s is amazing for a comedy. So, yeah. And, and then we were like, wow, okay, this is amazing. But a lot of things have to work. It's not just the movie. Then it's the date. Then it's the marketing, how much money they're putting, against it. I know, it was weird. This was I know reviewers were, like anything, like these comedies didn't love that movie either. Some reluctantly did, some, a lot didn't, but it wasn't a thing back then, this sort of aggregation sites. So it didn't bother me, honestly, for the first couple of films, because, it was what it was.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And the college tour, what a wonderful idea. Something that we don't see much of today, right? Movies aren't released with a tour. I mean, they still have screenings. I know that, but the tour is what a great concept, right?
Yeah, well, it's getting, if you look at college as like their own little universe, and for, let's call it, 80,000 kids at, Madison, Wisconsin or something, that is their universe. So we show it to, 150 kids at, the wherever we're showing it, the co-op or whatever. And I went on it, and sometimes we had Tara Reid, but Ryan, I think, went on most of them too. So it was a chance for 150 people to go, oh my gosh, this movie's hysterical. And so we did that at I want to say 12 or 15 colleges all over the U.S.
Wow.
I thought it was a great way to do word of mouth. It was nice that they could interact and talk to, Ryan after the movie as well. So.
Yeah, great, phenomenal. And I'm going to go out of order on this next one. Old Dogs. So when you have another movie I really enjoyed, when you have a movie like this, right, from your point of view, Walt, right, I was trying to think about, put myself in your shoes. When you look back, right, we know the final product, we see that, but your memories are much different than mine are, right? You're behind the scenes, you're creating this product, right? But then when you look back at who was involved with this, right, the late Kelly Preston, the late Robin Williams, do you think about things like that? I mean, those are from their reputations, two phenomenally wonderful people. Rest in peace both. But do you find that when you look back on a movie like that, it's those memories that you have that you think about, not just the final product, right? You have multiple of layers of things going on in your mind. Or am I overanalyzing this, Walt?
No, you kind of I think you look back at the people. I mean, certainly, I think most filmmakers will say, regardless of what you see on the screen, there is a whole separate emotion or emotional attachment that you have to a particular movie, let's say. Sometimes it's because the experience was amazing. Sometimes it's because you didn't think you'd be able to get through it. Sometimes it's because, people on set didn't get along or people loved each other. So there's this, I guess the only equivalent would be like watching, kind of on an anniversary thing, 20-year anniversary, like pictures of your life. But there's feelings behind those pictures. So, Old Dogs was challenging in a lot of ways, fun in a lot of ways too. We had a great cast, but, we started, we were kind of working on the script as we went. Certainly when the movie came out, that was a hard one for me. That was probably the one that like felt, I thought we made a fun movie, for an audience that, we collectively, didn't quite figure out in terms of like people thinking, oh, this is the sequel to Wild Hogs, or this is the, you know what I mean? It was a bit of a tweener.
Right.
The cast we had in it was amazing. It was just it was a very hard shoot. So that was, when I've just now started to appreciate it for what it is, as I sort of let all those feelings go.
Yeah.
So if it's on at night somewhere, cable, I can watch and laugh and sort of recall all the, mostly good times that we had on there, certainly shooting with the cast and stuff.
And when you talk about the difficulties, are you talking about maybe a pressure from a studio, or just scripts changing, or too many cooks in the kitchen? Like when you say difficult, is it those kind of things?
It was just, sometimes you go into something and the script, you'd want to spend 6 more months on the script.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, you get into a situation where actors' schedules are this, and the studio needs the movie for this because they have a hole now. And then you kind of go and you sort of figure it out as you go. And there's various degrees on that. I've been on movies that was probably, I take that back. Clifford was the same way, which was terrifying. It probably worse. We didn't even have, when I left to go to New York, I think we had they were turning in 10-page things off a outline. So we didn't even have a full script when I started prepping that movie. So yeah, there's a lot of times it's different ways to do it, but for me personally, I'd much rather, and probably I would work on a script too much before you go. But yeah, that's what I mean by that.
Gotcha.
We had a wonderful studio. The actors and everybody were all great. It was just me, struggling to figure out the story, the best version of this story, while we were going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And this is probably a stupid question, but can you see the genius of Robin Williams as you're working with him? Can you see that part of it during the shoot?
Yeah. He was incredible. First of all, he was so gracious with the crew. Mm-hmm. I mean, he'd buy people presents, and he was just he was so funny and smart. Just any scene he sort of elevates, right? And then the remarkable thing about him was when he got into a more dramatic phase, he just, I don't know, he had a way to sort of express drama or pain or anything like that without any filters. So he could go from, making you laugh out loud on a run somehow, and then he switches gears, and then, it's almost like you're looking into his soul as he's kind of emoting something darker. And I haven't seen that quality, the sort of, A to Z range, I guess, in a lot of people. That was, I thought, something pretty unique about him.
Yeah, that's really well said. Last movie, couple quick questions. Wild Hogs. It's pretty clear from the outside looking in that you have a really good rapport with John Travolta.
Yes.
What is it about John? We met him at a Comic-Con. I was covering a Comic-Con for the podcast. I don't think I met a nicer person in my life. Just a really sweet man. What's your take on John, and talk about your rapport, whatever you're comfortable with, Walt?
John's just an amazing human being, first of all.
Yep. So
when you couple that with being an amazing actor and singer and dancer, he's just a great, great dude, and his family is so amazing too. So, you have to. It's always nice. You have to understand he has been the biggest star in the world many times and for a long time. When we were growing up, certainly there was no one bigger in the world than him after Saturday Night Fever and Grease and all that stuff. So and then to have the resurgence with Pulp Fiction, and he's just done it for so long. He really is an icon. But to be, sort of so humble and gracious and just a nice human being, I just, he's always been a pleasure to work with, and just so fun. He's got a very unique take on the world, I think. So I enjoyed getting to know him, because there was, I don't know how long. I mean, we still talk and run into him. So, but it's, he's just one of the gems in the business.
No, that's really well said. One of the Wild Hogs is without question one of the most rewatchable, enjoyable comedies I've ever seen. I absolutely love it. My dad and I used to watch this thousands of times, just over and over and again. It never gets old, right? The one and Wild Hogs gets a shout out. I was watching Hot Tub Time Machine, another great comedy, by the way. That they said we're bonding like in Wild Hogs. They gave Wild Hogs a shout out. I thought that was really cool. I've been dying to tell you that forever. I'm sure you knew that, but
so it's interesting you say Hot Tub Time Machine. I'm sure the reason that they done that is because that was my boy Andrew Panay, the producer on that.
Oh, okay.
Who produced both Van Wilder and Old Dogs, and who I do 90% of these commercials with through his company, Panay Films. So that's why they mentioned that. But it's a pretty fun feeling when you start out pretty much as kids on a movie 20 years ago, and then you're still, working on movies or commercials or something all this time later. Panay's one of the great guys in this business, and a genius producer.
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at a movie in Wild Hogs that grossed nearly $250 million, so I think the people have spoken when it comes to this. With this cast, Tim Allen, Travolta, Martin Lawrence, William H. Macy, Ray Liotta, do you have input in who you want, Walt, or is that more of a collaborative decision? Like, do you say, before you even start filming, do you say, I got to have this guy or I got to have this actor? Or is it everyone working together deciding who can best fit these roles?
Yeah, I think it varies from movie to movie. I think it's so, in some movies, I would say it was pretty much my call on stuff. Other things were more of a kind of, committee approval, I guess, if you would. On that particular movie, I think Tim Allen was the only one attached when I got on the script. And I met with him and really loved him. And my pitch to the studio, because I think, Tim Allen, and here's another guy that just like keeps winning. I mean, he's had the biggest show on television. Then he did another almost biggest show on television. He's created all kinds of giant movies for himself. So the studio felt like, hey, we have Tim Allen, like put whoever else in it and let's go. But my pitch to them was, on the surface, you have a movie about four middle-aged bikers having a midlife crisis riding across the country. I mean, that could be like a Miramax movie. I said, who are we going to put on the one sheet that's going to all of a sudden start raising eyebrows and go, what is this? How do we have to see this? So that's when I pitched them. I said, let's just go and put 3 other great names along with Tim where it's a must see. And so I talked to them about John, and I think somebody had talked to him and seemed like there was mutual interest. So we flew to New York and then had a great meeting and then landed him. And then I changed, I got the studio. They were really great, I got to say, on that movie. Disney was pretty incredible partners. But I pitched them on changing the plumber character, who was a white Jewish guy, to make it African American. I do that on almost all films anyway. This was not kind of part of any movement. It's just my general sense of things and kind of how I grew up. So I just said, it makes a lot of sense. There's a huge African-American motorcycle culture. I said, to me, it brings more people in the tent. I just think it would be a great idea. So they said, great, fine. And then they said, who are you thinking about? And I said, Martin Lawrence. And they said, well, we're not, I'm not sure we're going to get Martin Lawrence, but I said, no, I think we could. And so, and then, I think I had conversations with UTA, which brought them at the time, and that deal closed like in a day. And then with Macy, what took a little bit longer because I had to fly back a couple times to talk to him. But I felt like Dudley's character was so big and broad, that you needed like an actor's actor to sort of level it out. And so, but I think the four guys in that movie just had, a really special chemistry. And then I knew we had done our job right. I think this was the first time they all got out there in New Mexico. We were in Santa Fe having dinner at this great restaurant, the four of us and myself and the producer. And we walked out and some guy just said, man, I don't know what movie this is, but I have to see it, commenting on why is Tim Allen, John Travolta, Martin Lawrence, and Bill Macy having dinner. So I kind of felt validated that we'd done our job, sort of casting it.
And the chemistry is remarkable. I mean, the scene with Martin Lawrence and William H. Macy in the restaurant where he gets nervous talking to Marissa, and he gets out of nowhere. He says, all I could think about were black jokes. And Martin looks at him and goes, yeah, which ones?
Yeah, like which ones? Yeah.
But like every scene that these guys have with each other, it's like they grew up together. Like that's, so I've been dying to ask you this too. So with like William H. Macy and Ray Liotta, guys that have been around, right? And not that Tim Allen and Travolta haven't, but are they open to feedback? Can you ever approach those two, Walt, and say, hey, did you ever think about doing it maybe this way? Or is it like, listen, I know what I'm doing. I got this. Don't worry about it. How are they with feedback?
Well, they're great. I think, most actors, even if they've been doing it for a long time, appreciate feedback. Certainly they appreciate a point of view, especially from the director.
Right.
So I think most actors that I know are more terrified if they're not getting any notes. They sort of feel out of control. They want to know how things are playing or a direction. And certainly someone who's been living with the material even longer than they have, should have a point of view. So I find that most actors, I haven't run into an actor yet. You hear stories of like, you can tell me faster and slower, but nothing else. I haven't run into any of those actors. I feel like most of them appreciate feedback. And generally, I'm such a fan of actors just in general and what they do and how they do it. I think anytime that I'm giving notes or thoughts on something, they also know that they have complete control of anything they want to do. So, whether that's improving stuff, whether that's, hey, thinking we do this for this scene, I'm pretty collaborative and open, about doing that. So when they feel like they have, sort of freedom to explore or be in control of their persona in the movie, then when you ask them, hey, we tried a couple like these, this just struck me, like what if we deadpan this one, or let's try like this or something. I find they generally, because you're so giving about letting them do whatever, they know that this is a process of just trying to find, it could be equally good versions of something. And they generally are game to try it. So yeah, they all, I think they all, pretty much appreciate feedback. I imagine it's always weird when you work with a new person, especially generationally, like if someone's been acting, for 3 decades or something before, you were directing, and then you're giving them thoughts on a character. But most actors I know love a POV and love, mostly support. like, I don't know, 90% of my job is making sure that there's someone that's watching them and supporting them. And, you know, I think it's terrifying to do what they do. So, yeah,
that's well said. I had one of the cast on the show. I had Stephen Tobolowsky on the show.
Stephen.
Yeah, he is funny as hell. He is a gifted storyteller. I had fun talking Wild Hogs with him, but he's another underrated, as Charlie, the underrated part of that cast. Again, the cast, you can go. You get after the first 5, it still gets stronger. Like, it's just the cast has no weak points. It's an amazing.
No, sometimes I get. You know, I had studios go, well, why do you want to cast up on everything? And I'm like, well, if you can cast up, why wouldn't you? You know, so I don't know, with Ray, you know, again, that was the same version of grounding a character. And I just said, who would be the scariest guy to actually chase these guys that could give legitimate threat? And then, you know, he put Ray Liotta in it, and who is also a gem of an actor and guy. And you know, and suddenly you have that. And then, you know, when you have people like Steven come in to play the sheriff and you know, the brothers, it was just kind of everywhere you looked. There was Marissa Tomei. There was just someone else. I don't know. I always relate it to tennis, you know, and if you have a world-class tennis player, you know, and you want to watch a game or even a set just between them and, you know, an amateur, it's a whole lot less fun if people aren't hitting the ball back properly. So for me, they don't all have to be names, but you're always trying to fill the movie with someone you think is going to pop in a scene and give the other actor in it, you know, a lot to play with.
Yeah, and I told Steven, I said if they wanted to go forward with this even now, it would make for one hell of a show on like Netflix or Disney owns it, so it's probably bad. But yeah, I think it would make for one heck of a show just following these guys. And I don't know, there's so many. This movie is just, like I said, it's so rewatchable. There's so many wonderful moments to it. Best use of Dead or Alive ever in movie history. Last question for you. Thank you for all this time, Walt. You've been so much fun to talk to. What are your own? You mentioned you went to the Batman with your son. What does your son or sons think about Dad's movies, and what is their favorite?
That's a good question. What did they think about? Let me see. I don't know if, honest to God, I swear I don't think they've watched Van Wilder. And they're old enough to now. Now it reminds me that maybe I should. But even that, I don't know if I would want to have my 16-year-old sort of see that. But they loved Wild Hogs. I think they loved the Clifford movie. You know, that's more, especially my daughter who I put in it.
Huge heart. That movie has such a huge heart.
Yeah, I was really proud of that. It's such a sweet film, and the way that sort of, you know, all the audiences around the world sort of responded to it was pretty great. So I would say that they liked that as well. But Wild Hogs for sure is one of the faves.
Yeah, let me ask you this: what is it about whether Wild Hogs or Clifford that audiences really gravitate to when it comes to you? What do you think it is? Do you think it's just the way you see things? Is it your perception of the world? Because they clearly gravitate to your work, Walt.
I think it's I think through all of them, it would be funny, not mean-spirited, with a little bit of heart and hope. So I guess like kind of this old school idea of movie making, you know, that has that. I haven't made like a cynical movie yet.
Right.
Now you could get pegged like, hey, he's the popcorn guy, or, you know, he's this, but those were always the movies that I enjoyed. And so those are the ones that I love to make.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You're so much fun to talk to. And I'm very appreciative of your time.
I appreciate it. You have a great show. And, you know, getting to know you, you're also a great guy. So keep up the amazing work. I hope to have some updates and on a couple sequels later, and we'll continue talking, but thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can also connect with Monday Morning Critic on Instagram and Facebook, MDM Critic on Twitter, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are found. All episodes available, www.mmcpodcast.com.